In the waning days of the Third Age, when the echoes of great deeds still rang through the halls of Minas Tirith, there came to the court of King Elisar a ranger of peculiar bearing. Thorek Ironfoot was his name, though none knew from whence he came, for his speech bore no mark of Gondor, Rohan, or any realm known to the wise. His beard was braided with silver threads, and his eyes held depths that spoke of sorrows long carried. "My lord king," spoke Thorek before the throne, his voice resonating like distant thunder, "I bring word of peril that stirs in the misty mountains. The Bloodstone cave, long sealed by the arts of old, shows signs of awakening." Aragorn leaned forward upon his throne, for he had heard whispers of this place in the ancient texts of Isildur. "Speak plainly, good Thorek. What manner of danger lies in this cave?" "The Khazad speak of it in hushed tone," replied the ranger. "They say it was sealed by Durin himself in the elder days, when the world was young. Within its crimson depths lie secrets that were meant to sleep until the ending of all things." Thus began the summons that would draw together the fellowship of the Bloodstone, though they knew not then that such would be their name in the songs of later days. From Rivendell came Elrohir, twin son of Elrond, bearing with him the ancient lore of his house. His fair face was troubled, for the Palantir of Orthanc had shown him visions of red stone and shadow moving in the deep places of the world. "The blood of the earth grows restless," he told the king in council. "My father speaks of a power bound long ago, when the Silmarils yet shone in the sky. This Bloodstone cave was wrought not by nature, but by design most fell." To their company was added Gimli, son of Glóin, for none knew the ways of mountain and stone better than he. Though advanced in years, the fire of adventure still burned bright in his eyes. I have heard the old songs," growled the dwarf. "My grandfather's grandfather spoke of red crystals that sang with voices not of this world. They say such stones were cast down from the sky in the days before the sun, and wherever they fell, the earth was changed." Last to join their council was Barahir of the Dunedain, a kinsman of the king, whose knowledge of the northern wastes was without equal. His weathered hands bore scars from many battles, and his gray eyes had looked upon wonders and terrors alike. "The signs are clear," he declared. "Wolves run in packs where none have been seen for generations. The very stones of the mountains weep red tears. If we do not act, the darkness that sleeps may wake to find the world unprepared." The companions departed Minas Tirith on a morning when mist clung to the Anduin like the breath of ghosts. Their road led north through Rohan, where Éomer king granted them fresh horses and provision, though he looked with troubled eyes upon their destination. "The Rohirrim do not ride in the high passage," he warned. "Our horses fear the red stones that gleam in the mountain's heart. Even the wild kind flee from that place." For many days they traveled, leaving behind the golden halls of Edoras and climbing ever higher into the realm of stone and sky. The air grew thin and cold, and strange birds circled overhead, ravens with eyes like garnet that watched their passage with unnatural intelligence. It was Elrohir who first sensed the wrongness in the very stones beneath their feet. "The rock remembers pain," he said, dismounting to place his palm upon a boulder beside the path. "Great anguish was wrought here in ages past." As they climbed higher, the stone itself began to change. What had been gray granite now showed veins of deep crimson, as if the mountain bled from within. The very air seemed to thicken, and their horses grew skittish, rolling their eyes and starting at shadows. On the 7th day of their ascent, they came upon the entrance to the Bloodstone cave. The mouth of the cave yawned before them like a wound in the mountain's flesh, framed by pillars of crystal that pulsed with inner fire. Ancient runes were carved deep into the stone, their meaning lost to all, save the eldest of the Eldar. "These are not elvish letters," murmured Elrohir, tracing the symbols with reverent fingers, "nor are they the script of men or dwarves, as it is known today." But Gimli's eyes grew wide as he beheld the markings. "Nay, These are runes of the first house, from the days when Durin walked beneath the stars. They speak of binding and sleeping, of powers locked away until the world's ending. Thorek approached the sealed entrance, his face grave with the weight of hidden knowledge. From his pack, he drew forth a key wrought of black iron and starlight, a thing of such evident age and power that the very air seemed to recoil from its presence. "This was given to my keeping by one whose name I may not speak," he said solemnly. "But know this, once this door is opened, it cannot be sealed again by any art known to the children of Iluvatar." The key turned in the lock with a sound like the breaking of the world, and the great doors of the Bloodstone cave swung inward. From within came a breath of air that spoke of depths unplumbed and secrets long hidden from the light of sun and stars. Into the bowels of the mountain they descended, their torches casting dancing shadows on walls that gleamed like frozen blood. The cave delved deep into the earth's heart, its passages branching and twisting like the roots of some vast tree turned to stone. Strange were the sights that met their eyes in that red realm. Crystals large as houses jutted from floor and ceiling, each one pulsing with its own inner light. And in their depths, shadows moved, shapes that might have been faces, or hands, or things for which no name existed in the tongues of Middle-earth. "This is no natural cave," breathed Barahir, his hand resting uneasily on his sword hilt. "These passages were carved by design, though for what purpose I dare not guess." As they ventured deeper, the temperature began to rise, though no fire could be seen. The very stones radiated heat, as if some great forge burned in the mountain's core, and with the heat came whispered voices speaking in languages that predated the awakening of the elves. It was Gimli who first heard the singing. "Listen," he commanded, holding up his hand for silence. "Do you hear it? The stones themselves give voice." And indeed, a melody seemed to rise from the crimson crystals around them, beautiful and terrible, like the song of the Ainur at the world's beginning, but corrupted by some ancient grief. The music spoke of glory lost, of light extinguished, of beauty transformed into something altogether other. "We should turn back," urged Barahir. This place was sealed for good reason. But Thorek pressed on, driven by purpose that he would not share. Deeper they went, through chambers vast as the halls of Khazad-dûm, until at last they came to a place where the cave opened into a cavern of such size that their torchlight could not reach its furthest walls. Here the Bloodstone formations had grown into fantastic shapes, spires and arches, bridges spanning bottomless chasm, and everywhere the pulse of red light that seemed to beat in rhythm with some vast, hidden heart. At the center of this hall stood a dais of black stone, and upon it rested something that made the companions draw back in wonder and fear. It was a tree, or what had once been a tree, now transformed into living crystal. Its trunk was broad as a tower, its branches reaching toward the cavern's unseen ceiling, and in every twig and leaf the red light pulsed and flowed. "Behold, the heart of sorrow," whispered Thorek, and for the first time his voice carried the weight of ages. "Here grows the last remnant of what was lost when the light of the two trees was stolen from the world." Elrohir stepped forward, his face pale with recognition. "This is no work of Ole the smith," he said. "This bears the mark of Melkor's hand. Yet there is beauty here, as well as corruption." As they drew nearer to the crystal tree, visions began to play within its translucent depths. They saw the halls of Valinor in their first glory, the light of Laurelin and Telperion illuminating courts of pearl and gold. They saw the Silmarils in their making, burning with light caught from the tree's radiance, and they saw darkness come creeping, spider-shaped and hungry. "These are memories," gasped Gimli. "The stone holds the memories of those who witnessed the darkening of Valinor." But it was more than memory. It was agony crystallized, the pain of those who had watched the light of the world die, trapped forever in red stone. From the shadows beyond the tree stepped a figure that froze the blood in their veins. Tall he was and fair of face, though his beauty was terrible to look upon. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes like stars reflected in deep water, and about him clung shadows that seemed to swallow light itself. "I am Sarondir," he spoke, and his voice was like music played on instruments of ice and flame. "Keeper of this place, guardian of memories that should not be remembered. Long have I waited for mortals brave enough to venture into these depths." The companions reached for their weapons, but found their hands stayed by a power they could not resist. Yet there was no malice in the being's presence, only sorrow deeper than the roots of mountains. "Fear not," continued Sarondir. "I am not your enemy, though I was made to be the enemy of all who live. I am the last of those who served the Dark Lord in the beginning, before evil twisted his purpose and ours." "Impossible," breathed Elrohir. "All of Sauron's servants were destroyed or fled into the void." "Not all," replied the Keeper sadly. "I was set to guard this place in the elder days, when Melkor first began his rebellion. Here he brought fragments of the holy light, thinking to possess what he could not create. But light corrupted becomes something neither light nor darkness. It becomes memory given form, eternal and unchanging." The crystal tree pulsed brighter at his words, and new visions swirled within its depths. They saw Melkor in his first glory, fair beyond description, singing harmonies that shaped the foundations of the world. They saw his growing pride, his desire for dominion, his first steps into shadow. "I have guarded these memories for ages uncounted," Sarondir continued, "but now the time approaches when they must be released, or they will consume the very bedrock of the world." "What do you ask of us?" demanded Thorak, his hand still resting on the hilt of his sword, though he could not draw it. Sarondir smiled, and in that expression was both beauty and terrible sadness. "The memories trapped in the Bloodstone must be freed, but they cannot simply be released. They must be borne by living mind, carried into the world above, and there dispersed into the songs and stories of your people." "And the price of such bearing?" asked Barahir, though he already feared the answer. "To carry these memories is to carry the pain of Valinor's darkening. You will know what it was to see perfect beauty destroyed. You will feel the anguish of the Valar when the light of the trees was extinguished. You will understand, as few have ever understood, what was truly lost when evil first entered the world." Gimli stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "I have carried grief before. The loss of Khazad-dûm was burden enough for any dwarf. If these memories must be borne, then I will bear them." "And I," said Elrohir, "my people have long grieved for what was lost. Let me carry that grief for all who cannot." But Sarondir shook his head. "The burden cannot be shared, yet it cannot be borne by one alone. Each of you must take a portion, and in taking it, you will be changed. You will live with these memories until the end of your days, and they will color every joy you know with the knowledge of what might have been." Thorak stepped forward then, and for the first time his true nature was revealed. As he drew near to the crystal tree, his form began to shimmer and change. His rough ranger's garb fell away like shadow, revealing robes of silver and blue. His weathered face became fair beyond mortal beauty, and starlight gleamed in his eyes. "I am Thorak no longer," he said. "I am Arundil's messenger, sent to gather what must be gathered before the world changes once more." The revelation of Thorak's true nature cast all their plans into new light. Here was one of the Eldar, though not of any kindred known to Middle-earth, a messenger from the halls of the West, sent on a mission whose purpose reached beyond their understanding. "The time of the dominion of men draws to its close," he explained, his voice now ringing with the music of the undying lands. "The last alliance was not the final battle, but the first of the final age. Powers long sleeping must be awakened or forever sealed, and the memories trapped here are key to what is to come." Sarondir nodded gravely. "He speaks truth. I have seen the signs in the crystal's depths. The very foundations of the world grow weary. If these memories are not released, they will burn through the bedrock like acid, and the mountain will become a wound that festers until the earth itself sickens. The process of memory-bearing began at sunrise on the morrow. Each companion approached the crystal tree and laid his hand upon its pulsing surface. As they did so, visions flooded their minds, not the distant, dreamlike images they had seen before, but immediate, overwhelming experiences. Gimli was the first to cry out as the memories struck him. He saw Aule the smith, weeping over his failed works, felt the dwarf father's anguish at seeing his children turn to instruments of Melkor's will. The pain of creation perverted struck him like a hammer blow, and he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Elrohir bore the memories of the Eldar, the pure joy of the first awakening under starlight, followed by the horror of the kinslaying and the curse that drove his people from paradise. He stood like a statue as the visions played through his mind, but his eyes were mirrors of grief beyond bearing. Barahir took upon himself the memories of men, their brief, bright lives, their constant struggle against darkness, their stubborn hope in the face of inevitable defeat. He saw the courage of his ancestors, but also their failures, their betrayals, their long slide into shadow and forgetting. And Thorek, who was Arundil's messenger, bore the weight of them all. The cosmic sorrow of the music's corruption, the anguish of the Ainur as they watched their perfect creation marred by discord, the price of the gift of free will. When it was done, the crystal tree stood empty and clear. Its red light faded to white. The memories were gone from their prison of stone, but the companions who had freed them were forever changed. As they prepared to leave the Bloodstone cave, Sarandir delivered a warning that chilled their hearts. The memories you bear are not passive things. They call to their source, and their source will come seeking them. Melkor may be thrust through the door of night, but his influence lingers in the world. There are those who serve him still, and they will sense what you carry. Even as he spoke, howls echoed through the mountain passes, not the voices of wolves, but something far more terrible. The hunt had begun. They emerged from the cave to find the world changed around them. The sky was the color of old blood, and shadows moved among the peaks that had no earthly source. Their horses had fled, leaving only scattered gear and the marks of claws upon the stone. "We must make haste," urged Barahir. "Whatever hunts us draws near." But their path down the mountain was blocked. Creatures of shadow and flame surrounded them, beings that had once been fair but were now twisted into shapes of nightmare. At their head rode a figure in black armor, his face hidden beneath a helm that seemed to swallow light. "I am Gothmog reborn," he declared, his voice like the grinding of glacier. "Give us what you have stolen from the deep places, and your deaths will be swift." "We have stolen nothing," replied Arundil's messenger. "We have freed what was wrongly imprisoned." "Freed?" The Dark Rider laughed, and the sound shattered stone. "You have doomed yourself, and all who dwell in Middle-earth. Those memories were caged for good reason. They are seeds of the world's unmaking." Battle was joined then, fierce and desperate. The companions fought with weapons of mortal make against foes from the depths of time, and though their skill was great, they were sorely pressed. It was only the power of the memories themselves that saved them. The images of ancient valor and sacrifice burned bright in their minds, lending strength to their arms and speed to their feet. The battle raged across the mountainside, shadow against light, memory against forgetting. But as the fight continued, the companions began to understand the true nature of their burden. The memories they carried were not merely images of the past, they were seeds of possibility, fragments of what the world might have been had evil never entered it. And those fragments were growing. Where Gimli's blood fell upon the stone, crystals of pure adamant sprouted. Where Elrohir's tears touched the earth, flowers bloomed that had not been seen since the elder days. Where Barahir's sweat mingled with the mountain dust, the very rock began to sing with voices of hope, long silent. The Dark Riders fell back in terror, for they could not endure the growing light. But their leader, Gothmog reborn, pressed his attack with desperate fury. "You do not understand," he cried, as he dueled with Arendel's messenger. If these memories take root, they will remake the world according to what was lost. All that has been built since the darkening will be undone. Men will forget their hard-won wisdom. Elves will abandon their grief-bought strength. Dwarves will lose their defiance, forged in suffering. And would that be so terrible? Asked the messenger, parrying a stroke that split the very air. To restore what should never have been lost? Yes, snarled Gothmog, for in losing our sorrows, we lose ourselves. The world as it is may be flawed, but it is real. The world these memories would create is a beautiful lie. It was then that the great twist of fate revealed itself. For Sarendir, who had guarded the memories for so long, stepped forth from the cave and cast off his seeming of sorrow. Gothmog speaks truth, he declared, and his voice rang with power that made the mountain tremble. I am not the last servant of Melkor the Dark Lord. I am the last servant of Melkor the Creator, who sang the world into being before pride corrupted his purpose. These memories are not of loss. They are of the world as it was meant to be, perfect and unchanging and dead. The revelation struck like lightning. The memories they carried were not fragments of paradise lost, but visions of a paradise that would have been a prison, a world without growth, without change, without the pain that teaches wisdom and the loss that makes love precious. In that moment of revelation, the companions understood the weight of the choice before them. They could release the memories fully and watch the world transform into Melkor's original vision of perfect, static beauty. They could hold them forever, bearing the pain until it consumed them. Or they could find a third way. There is another path, said Arendel's messenger, his voice heavy with newfound understanding. We can transform the memories as we carry them, filtering them through our own experiences of joy and sorrow, hope and despair. They will no longer be Melkor's vision of perfection, but our vision of what might yet be achieved. The process was agonizing beyond description. Each companion had to take the pure, perfect memories and merge them with their own flawed, mortal understanding. Gimli tempered the smith's perfect craft with knowledge of tools that break and works that fail. Elrohir married the Eldar's immortal grace with acceptance of endings and farewells. Barahir wed the courage of ancient heroes to the humility of those who know they might fail. And Arendel's messenger bound them all together with the wisdom of the Valar. That true creation comes not from perfection imposed, but from imperfection embraced and transcended. When the transformation was complete, the memories had become something new, not visions of what was lost, but inspirations for what might yet be built. They would not remake the world, but they would inspire its children to build better than they had before. Sarendir, freed at last from his ancient burden, looked upon them with something approaching peace. You have chosen wisely, he said. The memories will live now not as prisons of the past, but as seeds of hope for tomorrow. Gothmog and his riders faded like smoke. Their purpose ended. The dark sky cleared, and stars appeared overhead. Not the perfect, unchanging lights of Melkor's vision, but the wild, wandering fires that spoke of journeys yet to be taken and stories yet to be told. The companions made their way down from the misty mountain, forever changed by what they had experienced. The memories they carried would influence the songs of bards and the dreams of kings, but they would not replace the world that was with the world that might have been. For they had learned the greatest secret of all, that imperfection shared is greater than perfection achieved alone, and that the beauty of things that end is deeper than the beauty of things that never change. Thus ended the quest for the secrets that slept in the Bloodstone cave, not with the restoration of paradise, but with the acceptance that paradise was never meant to be restored, only remembered, mourned, and ultimately transcended. In the songs that were sung afterward, they were called the Fellowship of the Bloodstone, and their deed was counted among the great acts of the Fourth Age, the age when Middle-earth learned to build its own light, rather than merely cherish the light of ages past. Epilogue. the light that endures the passing of years. 7 years had passed since the Fellowship of the Bloodstone descended from the misty mountain, their hearts heavy with transformed memories, and their souls bearing the weight of cosmic understanding. The world had not ended, nor had it been remade in the image of lost perfection. Instead, it had begun to heal in ways both subtle and profound. In the great library of Minas Tirith, King Elisar sat with his advisors, studying reports that spoke of wonders beyond accounting. The harvests had grown more bountiful, though not through any unnatural abundance. Rather, farmers found themselves inspired to tend their fields with greater care, as if they remembered songs of growing things that they had never learned. Craftsmen across Gondor worked with new purpose, their hands guided by dreams of beauty that seemed to come from beyond memory. The memories work their influence gently, observed Aragorn, setting aside a letter from the Masters of Dale that spoke of unprecedented cooperation between men and dwarves in the rebuilding of Erebor. They do not compel or transform, but inspire. Standing beside the great window that looked out over the Pelennor field, Gimli, son of Glóin, nodded gravely. The dwarf had aged visibly in the years since their return. His beard now shot through with silver threads that caught the light like starfire. Yet his eyes burned brighter than before, as if some inner flame had been kindled that would never die. "Aye, my lord," he rumbled, "but the weight of them grows heavier with each passing season. I see now why Sarondir bore that expression of eternal sorrow. To carry the pain of the Ainur is to understand grief beyond the comprehension of mortal hearts." The memories they bore were not fading with time, as mortal recollections might. Instead, they seemed to deepen and expand, revealing new layers of meaning with each dawn. Gimli found himself dreaming of the great halls of Auli, where the dwarf fathers had first been shaped from stone and song. But now those dreams came not as visions of impossible perfection, but as reminders of the nobility inherent in honest labor and the joy to be found in creation born of love rather than pride. The wisdom of Rivendell in the last homely house. East of the sea, Elrohir walked the gardens where autumn leaves fell like golden tears. His twin brother Elladan had returned from the Grey Haven with news that their father Elrond had at last taken ship for the undying land. His long vigil in Middle-earth finally ended. Yet Elrohir remained, bound by the burden he had accepted in the Bloodstone cave. "You grow pale, brother," Elladan said with concern. "The memories you carry consume you like a slow fire." Elrohir paused beside a fountain where the water sang with voices that seemed to echo from the music of creation itself. "They do not consume," he replied softly. "They illuminate. I understand now why our people have always been drawn to sorrow. It is not mere melancholy, but recognition of the beauty that lies in impermanence. The memories of Valinor's darkening have taught me that even the death of perfect light can give birth to new forms of hope." He had become the keeper of the House of Elrond in all but name, tending to the needs of those few elves who still lingered in Middle-earth. Under his guidance, Rivendell had become something new, not a refuge from the changing world, but a bridge between what was passing away and what was yet to come. The great library had been opened to scholars of all races, and elvish lore was shared freely with men and dwarves alike. "The memories demand this," Elrohir explained to his brother. "They will not let me hoard knowledge like a dragon hoards gold. They whisper constantly of the joy that comes from teaching, from watching mortal minds grasp truths that will outlive their brief bodies. Yet the price was terrible." Each night, Elrohir relived the kinslaying at Alqualondë, felt the anguish of the Noldor as they were exiled from the Blessed Realm. Each morning, he watched the sun rise and remembered the first dawn after the trees were destroyed, when the light seemed thin and pale compared to what had been lost. It was a burden that would have driven a lesser spirit to madness. But Elrohir had been shaped by grief long before he entered the Bloodstone cave. The Rangers rode. In the wild lands between Rohan and the Misty Mountains, Barahir of the Dunedain rode the ancient paths of his people, but he no longer rode alone. Behind him came a small company of young men and women, rangers in training, who had come to learn from one whose wisdom had been tested in the deeps of the earth. The memories Barahir carried were perhaps the most painful of all, for they showed him the true history of the race of men. Not the simplified tales told in the halls of kings, but the complete record of their struggles, failures, and small victories. He saw Numenor in its glory and understood exactly how pride had led to its downfall. He witnessed the long defeat of the Dunedain and comprehended the weight of responsibility that came with being the guardians of a world that did not always welcome their protection. "Tell us again of the Bloodstone cave," requested Haleth, youngest of his followers, as they made camp beneath stars that seemed to burn with unusual brilliance. Barahir settled beside the fire, his weathered face catching the dancing light. "The cave taught us that memory is not about preserving the past unchanged," he said. "It is about understanding how the past shapes the present and guides the future. The memories we brought back are not museum pieces to be admired from a distance. They are seeds that must be planted in fertile ground." Around the fire, his students listened with the intensity of those who sensed they were hearing truths that would define their lives. Under Barahir's guidance, they were becoming something new. Rangers who did not merely guard against darkness, but actively worked to nurture the light. They carried news between isolated settlements, mediated disputes between neighboring people, and taught the skills of survival to those who ventured into the wild places. The old ways of the Dunedain were born of necessity. Barahir continued, "We became watchers in the shadows because the world had no room for us in the light. But the memories whisper of different choices, paths we might have taken if we had possessed greater wisdom. They do not let us change the past, but they help us avoid repeating ancient mistakes." The messenger's burden of all the fellowship. It was Arundel's messenger who bore the heaviest burden and the greatest responsibility. In the years since their return from the mountains, he had shed his mortal disguise entirely, revealing himself as Iratamo, the herald of the West, sent by the Valar themselves to oversee this crucial moment in the world's history. He walked now between the seen and unseen world, appearing sometimes as a figure of starlight and song, sometimes as a simple traveler on the road. The memories he carried were not merely those of grief and loss, but the complete record of the music of creation. Every note sung by the Ainur, every harmony that had shaped the foundations of reality, every discord that had introduced the possibility of free will into the ordered cosmos. Standing upon the Tower of Icthelion, as night deepened over Gondor, Eritamo raised his voice in a song that few mortal ears could hear. It was a song of integration, weaving the transformed memories into the very fabric of Middle-earth's destiny. Where his voice carried, the boundary between what was and what might be grew thin, allowing glimpses of potential futures to filter through like starlight through clouds. In Hobbiton, Sam Gamgee paused in his evening walk and felt his heart lift with inexplicable hope, though he could not have said why. In the halls of the mountain home, young dwarves found themselves inspired to attempt works of beauty that their masters declared impossible, yet somehow succeeded through methods they could not explain. In the forests of the woodland realm, the elves heard melodies in the wind that reminded them why they had first learned to sing. "The work is nearly complete," Eritamo whispered to the night wind. "The memories have taken root and begun to bloom. Soon, the choice will be made that will determine whether this transformation brings blessing or catastrophe." The Shadow's response, for the forces of darkness had not remained idle during these 7 years. In the ruins of Isengard, where Saruman's tower had once stood, something stirred in the flooded circles. The waters had receded, leaving behind formations of black crystal that pulsed with malevolent light. Here, the Nazgul king had returned, not in his ancient form, but as something new and terrible, shaped by the same cosmic forces that had transformed the Fellowship's memories. He called himself the Forgotten Lord, and his voice carried the power to make mortals remember things that had never happened. False memories of defeat and despair, counterfeit visions of a world where hope had never existed. Where the Fellowship carried memories that inspired, He spread remembrances that corrupted. They think they have won. He spoke to his assembled servants, beings of shadow that had once been men, but were now something altogether other. They believe their transformed memories will guide the world toward some greater destiny. But memory is a blade that cuts both ways. For every vision of what might be achieved, I shall provide a recollection of what must inevitably fail. The corruption spread subtly at first. Farmers who had been inspired to greater productivity began to remember famines that had never occurred, and their enthusiasm curdled into paranoid hoarding. Craftsmen who had reached for new heights of artistry found themselves recalling the disappointment of masterpieces cracked and broken, and their hands grew cautious and uninspired. In the halls of kings, advisors whispered of ancient betrayals that bore suspicious resemblance to current alliances. Old grudges that had been forgotten suddenly seemed fresh and urgent, fueled by memories that felt real but had no foundation in true history. The fellowship sensed the wrongness immediately. The memories they carried recoiled from the false recollections like oil from water, creating a resonance that rang through the spiritual realm like a struck bell. The gathering storm. "We are discovered," Gimli announced grimly as he stood before the assembled council in Minas Tirith. Dark circles ringed his eyes, for the memories he bore had been churning restlessly, showing him visions of a great smithy where truth and falsehood were forged into weapons for the final battle. "The enemy has learned to twist our work against itself." King Elisar leaned forward on his throne, his face grave with concern. "What manner of foe do we face? Is this some remnant of Sauron's power?" "Nay," replied Elrohir, who had ridden south from Rivendell at the calling of the memory. "This is something new, born from the same cosmic forces that we encountered in the Bloodstone cave, where we chose to transform the memories through acceptance of imperfection. This enemy has chosen to corrupt them through denial of truth itself." Barahir entered the hall at that moment, travel-stained and weary. "The situation worsened," he reported. "My rangers bring word of entire villages that have forgotten their own history. They remember defeats in battles that never occurred, recall treaties that were never signed, mourn kinsmen who were never born. The false memories spread like plague, and those infected become agents of further corruption. Then we must act swiftly," declared Eratomo, materializing in their midst like concentrated starlight. "The Forgotten Lord seeks to complete what Melkor began in the Elder Days. Not the destruction of the world, but its transformation into a realm where lies become indistinguishable from truth. If he succeeds, reality itself will become malleable, shaped by the strongest will rather than by the music of creation." The herald's words carried a weight of cosmic significance that made the very stones of Minas Tirith ring like bells. "The memories we bear are the key to stopping him, but they are also the source of his power. He feeds on the doubt and despair that our burden has created, growing stronger with each moment of weakness we experience." The final choice. As summer waned toward autumn, the crisis reached its culmination. The false memories had spread across a third of Middle-earth, creating regions where the very nature of reality had become uncertain. In these corrupted lands, maps changed from day to day, showing roads that led nowhere and rivers that flowed uphill. People aged backwards or forward without explanation, and the sun sometimes rose in the west, casting shadows that fell upward. The fellowship gathered one final time, not in the halls of kings, but in a simple glade deep in the old forest, where the trees remembered songs from before the first sunrise. Here, surrounded by the eldest living things in Middle-earth, they prepared for a confrontation that would determine the fate of memory itself. "We cannot fight him with sword and shield," Eratomo explained as they stood in the circle of ancient trees. "This is a battle that must be fought in the realm of pure thought, where memories clash like armies, and truth itself hangs in the balance." The process they had to undergo was a refinement of what they had experienced in the Bloodstone cave, but infinitely more dangerous. They would have to enter a state where their consciousness expanded to encompass not just their own memories, but the memories of all living things in Middle-earth. In that expanded state, they would confront the Forgotten Lord in a realm where will and reality were one. The risk is absolute, Gimli said soberly. If we fail, not only will we die, but our failure will give the enemy power over the memories we carry. He will corrupt them completely, turning our attempt at inspiration into a source of ultimate despair. And if we succeed? Asked Barahir. If we succeed, replied Elrohir, the memories will finally fulfill their true purpose. They will become part of the world's foundation, not as guides or inspirations, but as the bedrock of truth itself. No lie will be able to take root in a reality anchored by authentic memory. The battle beyond time. The confrontation took place in a dimension that existed outside normal space and time, where the Fellowship found themselves standing in a vast library whose shelves stretched beyond sight. Every book, scroll, and tablet contained the memories of living beings, their joy, sorrow, triumphs, and failure, preserved in forms that pulsed with their own inner light. At the center of this infinite archive stood the Forgotten Lord, no longer appearing as a corrupted wraith, but as a figure of terrible beauty, whose very presence made reality shimmer like heat haze. Around him swirled clouds of false memories, beautiful lies that promised easy answers and comfortable deceptions. "Welcome, bearers of authentic sorrow," he said, his voice like silver bells ringing over a battlefield. "You have brought me the very weapons I need to complete my work. Surrender the memories you carry, and I will ensure that no living being ever has to face the pain of true understanding again." The battle that followed was unlike any conflict in the history of Middle-earth. It was fought not with weapons, but with the fundamental nature of reality itself. The Fellowship stood as guardians of authentic experience, while their enemy wielded the seductive power of convenient falsehood. Gimli found himself reliving every moment of doubt he had ever experienced. But now each uncertainty was magnified 1,000-fold. The false memories whispered that his people had never truly been master craftsmen, that their greatest works were illusions created by elvish magic, that their pride in their heritage was nothing but vanity. But the true memories he carried, the transformed visions from the Bloodstone cave, provided an anchor. He remembered Allah's grief over his children's suffering, but also the smith's joy in their fierce independence. He held fast to the knowledge that doubt was not weakness, but the beginning of wisdom, and his certainty became a weapon that carved through the enemy's lies. Elrohir faced temptations that struck at the very core of his being. The false memories offered him visions of Valinor restored, his people recalled from exile, the Silmarils reforged to burn with imperishable light. All he had to do was accept that the current world was an aberration, a mistake that could be corrected if only he would surrender his burden of authentic grief. But the memories he bore whispered of deeper truths. They showed him that exile had taught the Eldar compassion, that loss had given them wisdom, that their sorrow had become a gift they could offer to others who suffered. He rejected the false paradise and chose instead the painful beauty of the world as it truly was. Barahir confronted memories of a Numenor that had never fallen, a race of men who had achieved immortality through wisdom rather than pride. The false visions showed him his ancestors ruling over a world where death had been conquered and all suffering eliminated through the application of perfect knowledge. Yet the authentic memories he carried reminded him that mortality was not a curse, but a gift, that the brevity of human life gave it meaning, that the possibility of failure made success worth achieving. He stood firm against the seduction of false immortality and held fast to the truth that courage meant facing death, not avoiding it. The heralds sacrificed. It was Eretamo who faced the greatest temptation and made the ultimate sacrifice. The Forgotten Lord offered him a return to the music's original purity, a chance to undo the discord that Melkor had introduced, to restore the world to its intended state of perfect harmony. "You know the pain that free will has brought," the enemy whispered. "You have seen the war, the betrayal, the countless small cruelties that thinking beings inflict upon each other. Would it not be better to return to the original plan, where every voice sang in perfect unison?" For a moment that lasted eternity, Eratamo wavered. The memories he carried showed him the price of choice, the anguish of the kinstrife, the corruption of the Númenórean, the long defeat of the Dunedain. Would not peace be preferable to this endless struggle? But then he heard it, a sound that the Forgotten Lord could not duplicate or corrupt. It was the laughter of Hobbit, the sound of beings who had been given the gift of choice and had chosen joy despite all the sorrows of the world. It was the defiant singing of the dwarves in their deep hall, celebrating craftsmanship that would outlast their maker. It was the bittersweet melodies of the elves, who sang of loss because they had learned to love what could be lost. The music is more beautiful with discord than it ever was in perfect harmony, Eratamo declared, and his words rang with the authority of the Ainur themselves. The notes that clash and struggle create complexities that planned perfection could never achieve. With that declaration, he made his choice. Instead of using the memories as weapons against the Forgotten Lord, he released them completely, not into the enemy's grasp, but into the fundamental structure of reality itself. The transformed memories became part of the world's foundation, as immutable as the laws of physics, as permanent as the light of stars. The effort consumed him utterly. Eratamo, herald of the West, gave up his immortal existence to ensure that truth would always have a place in the world. As his form dissolved into pure light, he spoke his final word. Let the choice always remain. Let the struggle always continue. Let the music always be more than the sum of its parts. The new dawn, the Forgotten Lord's scream of rage and defeat, shattered the dimensions of the archive, but it could not undo what had been accomplished. The false memories he had created crumbled like sand castles before the tide, leaving only the authentic experiences of living being. Across Middle-earth, people awakened from nightmares of events that had never occurred, remembering clearly once again who they truly were and what they had actually experienced. But the change was deeper than mere correction. The transformation Eratamo had wrought was woven into the very fabric of existence. From that day forward, lies could still be told and believed, but they could never completely overwhelm truth. False memories might be planted, but authentic experience would always assert itself in the end. The world had been given an immune system against the corruption of reality itself. Gimli, Elrohir, and Barahir found themselves returned to the old forest glade, forever changed by what they had witnessed and participated in. The memories they had carried were gone, not destroyed, but fulfilled, their burden lifted through Eratamo's sacrifice. "Is it finished?" asked Gimli, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "It is," replied Elrohir, but his tone carried both satisfaction and profound sorrow. "The Herald has given us the greatest gift possible, the assurance that our choices will always matter, that our struggles will always have meaning." Barahir nodded slowly, understanding flooding through him. The memories we carried were never meant to remain with us forever. They were seeds that needed to be planted, and now they have taken root in the very foundations of the world. The legacy, in the years that followed, the true magnitude of what had been accomplished became clear. The Fourth Age, which had begun with the dominion of men, became something unprecedented. An age where all the free peoples worked together, not because they were compelled to, but because they chose to, despite their differences. The dwarves emerged from their mountain halls and built great cities that were marvels of engineering and beauty. But unlike the works of Númenor, these achievements were shaped by the knowledge that they were temporary, that they would one day crumble, and that this transience made them more, rather than less, precious. The elves who remained in Middle-earth found new purpose as teachers and guardians of memory. But they no longer hoarded their wisdom like treasures. Instead, they shared freely with all who sought knowledge, understanding that wisdom increased when it was given away rather than diminished. Men spread across the world with unprecedented vigor, not because they sought to conquer, but because they desired to explore. They carried with them the memory of choices both wise and foolish, and they used that knowledge to build societies that honored both individual freedom and collective responsibility. Even the lands that had been scarred by darkness began to heal. Mordor itself became a garden, tended by those who understood that the most beautiful flowers often grew from the richest compost. The Nazgul king's corruption had been purged, leaving behind soil that was more fertile for having been poisoned and reclaimed. The final memory. On the 10th anniversary of the Battle Beyond Time, the 3 surviving members of the Fellowship gathered one last time in the ruins of Isengard. Where Saruman's tower had once stood, a tree now grew, not the crystalline perfection of the Bloodstone cave, but a living oak whose branches reached toward a sky that seemed brighter than it had been in ages. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Gimli, his beard now completely silver, but his eyes still bright with purpose. "The burden we carried, the choice we made." Elrohir smiled, and for the first time in years, the expression held no shadow of sorrow. "How can I regret a choice that made choice itself more meaningful? We gave up the illusion of certainty for the reality of hope." Barahir, now recognized as the wisest of the Rangers and counselor to kings, placed his hand on the oak's bark. Eritamo's sacrifice ensured that future generations will face their own challenges with authentic knowledge of what came before. They will make mistakes, as we did, but they will not repeat the errors that ignorance breeds. As they stood in the shadow of the tree that had grown from the ashes of ambition, a wind rose that carried the scent of flowers from distant meadows and the sound of children's laughter from a village beyond the horizon. It was the wind of a world that had learned to treasure its imperfections, to find beauty in struggle, and to discover that the greatest adventures came not from seeking perfection, but from choosing to create meaning in the midst of uncertainty. The Fellowship of the Bloodstone had ended, but their true work had just begun, for they had given the world the most precious gift of all, the knowledge that memory, choice, and hope were not separate things, but aspects of a single truth that would endure as long as any thinking being drew breath beneath the stars. In the songs that would be sung in ages yet to come, they would be remembered not as heroes who saved the world, but as friends who reminded it how to save itself. And in that remembering, the deepest magic of all would continue to work its will. The magic of stories truthfully told, honestly shared, and lovingly preserved for those who would need them in the darkness yet to come. Thus ends the tale of the Fellowship of the Bloodstone, whose greatest victory was not in what they preserved, but in what they chose to release.